everyone. This is Demetria Clark with the Heart of Herbs Herbal School podcast, and I'm really, really excited. Today we have Kadia who runs Yah's Apothecary, and there's books and classes and information and articles and formulas. It's an amazing resource to go check out, and I will have her give you the URL and all the deets here in just a second because I think that you're going to love everything that's on offer. Also, she homeschools and she works as an herbalist in her community. So I'm really, really excited to have you on today. Kadia, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the introduction. And it's an honor and pleasure to be here with you today. Yes, my name is KhadiYah Preciado, and I run Yas Apothecary. I am the lead educator there, and we teach holistic herbalism, but with a African-centered perspective and also biblically sound as well. And our main mission is just to train herbalists into practitioners and also help them to build herbal businesses that are going to be sustainable and then also profitable.
Oh, I love that. I'm all about the money profit. I don't know if I've been talking about that for years because I homeschooled also. I unschooled my sons and I needed to make money to feed them. So herbalism for free was never going to work for me. So
Yeah.
I have always kind of been of that model, and I love that. So when you say African, and tell me if I'm saying this wrong, African-centered herbalism, what is your definition of that, and what does that mean for someone who's never heard of that before? And also, just are you talking about the whole continent? Or
Oh,
different continental practices, or are you talking about individual countries? Because I always try to remind students that when we say Asia, there's more than one country in Asia. Africa, there's more than one country in Africa.
right,
So
right.
I would love to hear what your whole take on that is.
Oh, I love that question. I've never been asked with that depth before. So brownie points to you as an interviewer. But yeah, so when I say African Center, we teach African herbalism, and I like to say it's for modern times. So I dig back deep to the African herbal practices that we see in many different regions. And like as you mentioned, it is, a whole continent with so many 54 countries. And so there's different perspectives, but I would say some of the general practices about how they approach plants, learned about plant, and then also how they teach plants, mostly in, I would say, Western Africa, or Sub-Saharan Africa, as it's called, is really where I kind of dive deep. And so we teach basically from things like doctrine of signatures and just characteristics of plants and more of organ systems and linking that with colors and taste. And so it's a different perspective that isn't talked about as much. And then also for the modern times, I try to bring it back to today all throughout the diaspora and kind of shine a light on, underserved or under talked about areas. And so it looks different. And based on the different things that I've learned, I teach on that perspective, but then I kind of bring it into how I see things. So with a more modern take on it and with a more biblical perspective as well.
I love that. I've worked in underserved areas for a long time myself because I grew up in one. So, I just went back to where I was from in some ways, but I think that we forget that there are so many rich traditions in herbalism in the United States. And I think a lot of what we forget when it comes to the world is a lot of people came to herbalism all around the world for the same reason. They needed something and they
Yeah.
looked to nature and they said, how can I make this work? And how can we share information and knowledge? And so when you are teaching about African herbalism in the United States, do you talk about African herbs too? Because that is a place I just do not have enough information on, even though I've gone to herb markets, on the continent before. I just don't know a lot about it. And so like, is it the philosophy with herbs that we find in the United States or African herbs or both?
Both. So we do talk about African herbs, but in today, like, it is modern. We shared so many different things, and even some perspectives we learn from other people. And I do like to say that even though I'll say even African history is still American history. And so it's not to, separate, it's to learn. And what you'll find is there are similarities from a lot of different groups as well. So I do talk about African herbs, but then I also share about some of the herbs that we do use, but many people don't know that they actually have origins in Africa. So, like, peppermint, for instance, and there's like five different mints that are indigenous to Africa. Hibiscus, most herbalists love hibiscus. That's another one. Things like senna. And so it's even just about kind of learning it or relearning different things about some of the favorite plants as well. So it's not just like you have to stick in this box, but it's just learning, a different perspective or different names for it and different uses traditionally as you go through history.
Oh, I love that. I loved when I could go to, I would go to like I was mostly the northern part of the continent that I've been to, but I'd be in Egypt and I'd go to the herb markets. It's like the first thing I'd want to go to, right? And I guess technically Egypt would be considered part of the Middle East though too. So, but anyways, just knowing the Latin names, even though I had no idea what the name was, the indigenous name, I was like I could still get access to the plant and learn just from communication by having that Latin name as a beginning. So I can see how people forget that a lot of the plants that we use in the US, they're not from the US. People brought them with them, and there was a reason why they brought them with them because they worked. And so I
Right.
love that you talk about that blending and that connection because the history of the United States and herbalism is very complex and very beautiful. And I think that it is just so powerful to be able to share that with our students. And I mean, I know I love doing that. So I'm assuming you do too, because you have lots of students. So when you say biblically is it biblically centered or focused?
Hmm.
What does that mean for someone who's never heard that term before, or they instantly go to some religious stereotype? What how do you feel that that fits in with your practice?
Yeah, so for me, faith is always the forefront of everything that I do. And with a biblical perspective, it has just allowed me to know that I have a creator and he is like the master painter. He has this whole world that we're living and experiencing is a part of his masterpiece, but he's left patterns and he has systems with things. And so in understanding why he made it, that he has it, that everything has a purpose, all those different things has led me to kind of understand also in my relationship with the plants and just my relationship and role as a person here and what herbs were designed to be and how they were designed to be used. And in the Bible there's actually many scriptures about that, like plants are helpers, they're here for the service of man and also for healing and different things like that. And so I fully embrace that, and I look at the ways that they utilize herbs, whether it was through food or for mourning and different things like that, and just think about in ways that you can practically use them today. One of the things that I look at, even in African herbalism, is not something that would be spoken, but I noticed just in observing that it's much more about like food and lifestyle, and a lot of times on external use as well. Whereas a lot of times we talk about like teas and tinctures here and just trying to blend all those different things together. So a lot of times I have a revelation, just thinking, oh, wow, that's so wonderful. But then I can see, oh, in scripture, it's already been named. And so it just allows me to um, just look at things from a different perspective, and then it's always making based on the patterns that I see, just seeing how I fit into all of that and just how I can make sense of everything.
Oh, I love that. That's really beautiful. I think that I think that we forget sometimes as human beings who are herbalists that nature has patterns, has uses, has a history, and there's a reason why these plants have evolved and lived for so long on this planet, you know.
Right.
And so I think it's really cool, and I think that that description was really great because I think that it. you can think about herbalism in very spiritual ways. And I think sometimes people forget that there is this connection to, you know, planet or source or God or whatever people call it. It's there for people. So I
Yeah.
love that you share that with your students and your clients. So, what are some of your favorite aspects of being a practicing herbalist and owning an apothecary?
One of the you said what was the exact word that you said?
Favorite aspects. I guess
Yeah.
that was a fun you know what? So I grew up in like a million different places and I have the weirdest dialects sometimes the way that I talk and put words together. So
No,
I
no.
apologize, but it did sound funny. When I reset it, I was like, what do you love about? How's that?
Oh, no, no, it's not that. My mind just instantly just fires in 100 different directions, so I had to make sure that
Yeah,
I
no, I appreciate
stayed
you
back.
asking for clarity because I do know I can talk. I say I talk goofy.
No, you don't. It's my mind. My mind is goofy. I have always like a million tabs open, so that was me.
I love that.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite aspects is on seeing people become more empowered and people also. I think it's important not just to learn a thing for today. Like they say, to give a person a fish, but to be able to see them to be much more knowledgeable about what's going on in their body and just feel empowered that they have an active role because they do in the healing process. So I love just teaching them like systems and giving them tools so that they can feel confident on their own, that they can be, and understand what's going on. Because you know, just because a lot of times people have heard the same things over and over and they're scared to kind of ask the questions, and I always say there's no dumb questions, there's no stupid questions, like, even what is holistic, to be able to try to unpack all of those different things. So I just like for people to be able to just teach them in a simplistic way and, just not complicate things all the time and just seeing them be able to now that they not depend on me for everything but to be able to make their own recipes and kind of understand the mindset that goes into the process. So I just like empowering others and just seeing them have the tools and utilize them and them go away feeling like they can go on and help other people because we're limited in our capacity and our years, and our impacts, but through helping more and more people if they go out and do the work as well. So I think it's just equipping, the next generation or our peers with the things that they need to be able to serve people to the highest degree.
I love that. I think that's really powerful. I always tell students that, like it or not, when you start working with clients, your first job is to be a teacher. So it sounds like you share the same things, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is how things are done, and let's work together. And empowerment and education, I think, is great.
Right.
It sounds like that's a big part of the work that you do. So, how did you get into herbalism? Was it after you had your first child, or was it something that was always in your lifeblood, or did you just take a class and go, boom?
No, for me, actually, I was always interested in health. My mom, she'll tell anyone multiple times that when I was 5, I told her I wanted to be a vegetarian. I was a pescatarian, vegan, alkaline vegan. I've always just been interested in health. And for me, it actually started with a natural hair journey. So, in the Black community, there's perming of the hair, it's called, but it's really chemically relaxing your hair or straightening it. And so that's something that a lot of Black girls grow up with their hair being relaxed. And then when I was older, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I just chopped up off my hair. And then I started being more educated about like the products. And then I found like a lot of natural products aren't really 100% natural or don't really align with what I think is natural. And so I started making my own products. And then I said, it's not just about what I'm putting on my hair and then my skin, also what I put inside myself. And so I started being more educated on that. And then I said, I looked at my life, people would have seen on the outside and said that I was very healthy, but I knew that I was struggling with things for over a decade. I had absent periods. So it'd be 4 or even 5 months, and I wouldn't know when my period was coming, and I wasn't on birth control. And so, that wasn't normal and that wasn't healthy. And so I wanted to deal with that. I had constipation, I had hormonal acne. So I had a bunch of different things going on. And so I tried evening primrose. I just Googled. I always love to say that I Googled so that people know that I started out the same way that many people do. I just Googled, I tried evening primrose and it worked, but I had to continuously use it. And so then that's when I decided to look deeper. I prayed about it. So that's where the faith came in. And I'm a person where I just have to make it make sense to me. So if I read something, I'm like, I have to make the connections for myself and see, but how, but why. I'm kind of like a child wanting to get to why until you get to the simplest layer. And so that's what it led me on that journey of understanding. And then when I finally understood, so not just knew, but when I finally understood like the African herbal perspective, I realized that it wasn't just about my uterus. I didn't just need um, like a raspberry, but I actually need to look at other things. I needed to look at, and it took me going back to when I was born. I was born at 30 weeks and I had jaundice. So I attribute that to my liver, suffered from the very beginning. And so I always say I didn't get off on the right foot with my liver. And so I had to go through this whole journey of learning my body and different things like that. So it wasn't like just one moment, it was struggles and just learning, trying things. Some things, didn't work, and just really learning to listen to my body and understand it. And um yeah, and now I'm here. I just share and try to teach different things, and then I realize, oh, I actually have a method that I use, and so it just evolves slowly over time. But it surprises people, and I do want to say it too. You don't have to be the quote unquote crunchy person or whatever. I still have bugs that I'm scared of in the garden and other things like that. So it can look very different for many people, and you don't have to be, the plant person. A lot of people that I grew up with, family, they still are very surprised of how I've taken a liking to the plants. So yeah, I've rambled, but I
No,
hope
I love that. I love learning all of that
it
about you. I think that's inspiring because a lot of students, I think, think someone goes into becoming an herbalist and an herbal teacher like through some like ordained from like the plants, right? And they're like, no, it was a struggle and I had to learn and had to read and or there's, I have some students who are like, I kill everything I try to grow. And I'm like, that's okay. That's not your wheelhouse, like don't be too hard on yourself. So I think it's good for us to hear that other people have their herbal struggles or they started with, Google or whatever. And I think that's really great. I love that you shared so openly with everyone about that.
yeah, thank you.
So, I guess like you have, and you mentioned this in something that you sent me, the 4 levels of safety. Would you love to share that? Or because I'm
Yeah.
all about safety and I'm really, really tired of, for me, going and seeing just some of these really unsafe practices, just being like, oh, the miracle cure. And I'm like, oh, you're kind of poisoning yourself. Like, I don't know about that. So, like, what are your 4 safety tips?
Oh no, I love that because I feel the same way. And I caution people not just, the trendy herbalism or just, hearing the 60 seconds, but I think it's important to take more time to kind of let people know that these are the situations in which this herb is appropriate and not appropriate, or and encouraging people on the proper dosage and all those different things. So not just to just see something on Google and don't do research. So I think that that's really important, and so that's why I wanted to kind of classify herbs in a certain way. I actually have something called the 4-step journey too, and it kind of goes along with it. So I feel like a lot of times we don't know where to start. So we kind of just pick the herb that, we heard one time or we saw somewhere or that someone else is using. But there's actually more of a, I would say, organic way of looking at plants. And so with well, I'll just say the 4-step journey if you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah, no, no, please, please. But first, where do people find you?
So
So
this
they can start typing while they're listening to you talk about the 4 C's and get themselves enrolled.
well, thank you.
Or
So
yeah, the 4 safety, not the 4 C's. I don't know where that came from. Sorry. The safety.
yeah. So the best place to find me is on yahsapothecary.com. So it's YAHS apothecary.com. I can also be found on social, so on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It's KhadiYah Preciado, my name. And then also we have for Yah's Apothecary on Instagram and Facebook too. Yeah, so the 4 step journey is, like I said, I just want it to be more organic. So I think that you should start in the kitchen first. A lot of times we want to go to something that just seems more fun and exciting, exotic, and things like that. But the kitchen herbs, I feel like those are the most accessible for most people. They're the ones that we have more of a relationship with. We're used to them, their taste of them, and different things like that. So I think it's always important to start there and then to go up to the backyard. So in my house, I live in the South, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. So we have a lot of the houses are, you have the kitchen, it goes off to the garage and right to the backyard. So I think of it as what's closest to me. The kitchen first when I'm in the home, the backyard, then go out to the forest. That's when you do the foraging and different things like that. And then you can look at the imported or abroad herbs. And it kind of coincides with the 4 levels of safety, which is the first level of safety is more of our culinary herbs that we would use more as food. And then you go into that second, which are specific remedies. So you just think of things like blue vervain, motherwort. Those are things where typically you're using them for a specific reason. Sometimes, like those two, they're really bitter, so you wouldn't really be using them every day, if like in a tea or something like that, or as food necessarily. But you utilize them for a specific purpose. And some of the ones in here, they are generally safe, but you just don't use them for ever. Whereas you might use an adaptogen for several months, or you might use some of our alternative herbs for longer term. And then we have the low dose herbs, which are very important, and you need a little bit more expertise. So as you're going through the 4 steps, and then as you're going through the 4 levels, it just increases in the expertise that you need to have. So that's why I believe it's more organic. And then the last is the external use herbs, or some things like comfrey, I usually put more as external use, or you would use it more low dose. So some can kind of be a little bit in between. But things like arnica or things like witch hazel, where you need to use more care, and mostly I would say for the average practitioner, you probably use it more on the skin than you would try to use it internally. And so I just made that to let people know this is a starting point. This is where you can stay. And, while you're still learning, experimenting, these are the safest ones to start with. And then as you build your expertise, naturally go out. So you don't have to have a big apothecary of 100 herbs overnight. Stick with 5 and then just, 10, then 15. And so it's like a slow, gradual progression so that you're staying smart. You are learning more about the herbs, you're getting deeper with them. And, that's the overall goal, to be able to actually use the herbs and get positive results from them.
Oh, I love that. I love the I always say if someone calls in the middle of the night, what
Yeah.
is the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna
And
check
it's
your
not
your
right.
your spice rack, then maybe your
Right.
medicine chest, then your backyard, then the drugstore. And then that's like what I talk about like with little kids, and that's kind of really like a very similar idea, except it's just herbs. And I love that. I think that you were brilliant to put it together that way. It just sounds so accessible and easy to think about the progression of usage in really just such a lovely way. So thank you for sharing that with us. I really just I adored that idea of I always talk to students about using kitchen herbs, like, hey, there's a reason why we carried these things around with us for thousands of years. Here's why, right? But I
Right.
also think that it's like, I think sometimes people forget that how powerful they are and what a good place they are to start with. So thank you for that reminder. I'm not going to keep you for that much longer because I know that you're busy, but I was just wondering if you would want to share a little bit of why you believe that relearning the traditions of our forefathers is important.
Yeah.
Because you had
As
wrote about that, and I hadn't really thought about that, so I thought, "Ooh, I'm going to ask about that."
Oh, yeah. Well, just like you said, from there, there's a reason why they have been used. it's because, that they have a purpose. So I always like to say, with the culinary foods, we see a lot of times tomato paired with things like a basil or cilantro or different things like that. And things like cilantro can help with the acidity of tomatoes, or it can help, with digestion. And so when we had these things, it wasn't just, added in just for the look. It was also function too. And so I think it's important, like you said, to herbalism isn't just like when you're just making your tinctures. It can also be in the cooking and the whole experience. And also, like you said about with children, I think about the way in which things just make sense, the way in which things just organically happen is the best. And I always remind people, like, let's say you wanted to take up tennis. The first thing that you probably would do would not be to pick up a book on tennis and read about tennis. But that's a lot of times the way that people think of approaching herbs. And while I think that reading is very important, research and all of that is really important too, we have to remember to immerse ourselves and to get out there and to actually do. And so I like to also look at, we are in an information age. We have so much information, right? Information overload, a lot of misinformation too that also comes with it. But I think about what about the people who didn't have that? If you think about like the first people that tried plants, if they didn't know, they didn't have the field guides or anything handy, how were they able to tell the different herbs apart? How are they able to know which one's safe or which one's not? And so I try to think with, those lens, and not necessarily of things that I were already taught or read about, but to try to look and make connections in that way. And I think about the way that I would explain things to my children and the way that they just kind of they notice things that are written in books, but they didn't read it. And so it's just so important to keep those traditions alive, because I think, and it's hard because there's always just a mismatch of balance. And like I said, like researching books, all of things are really important, and I really encourage them. But at the same time, that's why a lot of herbalists lack confidence, because they feel like they have to be like this perfect personification of what they think an herbalist looks like. Whereas if we kind of look back in history, it just was a natural, normal thing. Having the gardens preserving food. I come from family that did that on both sides, and they didn't necessarily call themselves a special name, but when you look at it, that's what they were doing. And so I think that it's just important to remember that this is something that all of us, we have these bodies, and we have them for as long as we do. And so we should really understand our bodies, and we should feel confident and really have responsibility over our body and what happens to it. We should be able to speak about the different things that are going on, and we should be the ones to notice. And it shouldn't be outsourced to a person we see a lot of times one time a year. And so
For
just
15
being
minutes.
right, right, for 15 minutes and they're running out the door. And so yeah, I think that we just in some ways we really have to be more simplistic in our approach, and just start where we are um as herbalists.
Oh, I love that. I know that I've been saying I love that a lot in this interaction, but it's true. So anyways, but I really think that, we talk about hitting the, students will be like, "Oh, they get nervous about herbs and stuff." And I think that you probably give similar advice, and it's like, "Well, go to the grocery store, pick up some of the herbs that they have in the fresh ones. Go to like an Asian market or an Indian market or
Right.
Latin American market. They all have different kinds of fresh
Right.
herbs that are culinary herbs, right? And
Right.
get to know those and use them and see what they taste like. And
Right.
they're always like, "Oh, I didn't even know these markets existed." And I'm like, "So go. You're going to
Right.
have great tasting food. And, it isn't just garlic and fresh basil, that you can get in a lot of grocery stores. There's lots of variety out there." And so, I love the fact that you encourage the food aspect of herbalism. I think for me, that was one of the best ways I could get my kids to be herbally compliant was putting it in their food when they
Yeah.
weren't feeling good. It's like it's a parenting hack, right? You know. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate your time. And can you give everyone your information again so they can find you and where they can get your writing, your book, all this kind of stuff. Just let us know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I definitely enjoyed this. I loved it too. So the best place to contact me would be on yasapothecary.com. But you can also, check out some of the videos that we have on YouTube is the longer, more detailed videos. Or if you're short on time, Instagram and Facebook at my name, KhadiYah Preciado. I guess I should spell it because it's very
I'll have it
difficult
in
for
the
many
link.
people.
I'll have it in the description too. So, but yeah, definitely feel
Oh,
free to spell it.
yes. So like Instagram.com/ or Facebook.com/ KhadiYah, last name Preciado.
Thank you so much. I think people are going to love it. And I just wanted to again thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable and I really appreciate it. And I would love to revisit you again and for another episode talking about your expertise.
Of course.
So let's definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much for the platform and sharing all that you do for as long as you have been. You are definitely a resource.
Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. You have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.